Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Lento, and this is Maggie Turner, and we're here today to talk about this upcoming eclipse in Pisces that's happening on September 17th at 25 degrees of Pisces. So let's, before we pull up the chart, talk a little bit about why an eclipse happens. Basically, an eclipse is always going to be on either a full moon or a new moon, which, as we know, happens every month during the lunar cycle. But what makes it an eclipse is its proximity to the lunar nodes, which are not actual physical bodies, but are points where the ecliptic of the sun and the moon cross paths. So basically, from our perspective on Earth during an eclipse, the sun and the moon are lining up in some way, either at the same place in the sky during a solar eclipse, which is a new moon, where the moon is then obscuring the sun, or during a lunar eclipse, it's a full moon, and the Earth is in between the moon and the sun. Does that make sense to you, Maggie? Anything you would
Yes,
add to that?
exactly. And there's also types of eclipses. Some are, as we can see from the last eclipse we all witnessed, there's a total eclipse where the moon completely overtakes the sun. And then there's partial or annular or prenumbral eclipses where it's just like a bit of a shadow. So
Yeah,
this one's not really as intense as the April 8th eclipse. It's a partial eclipse, I believe, in our area of the world. But in other areas of the world, it'll be more felt in its totality. So there are different levels also of how close that nodal axis is and all of that kind of stuff. So, yes, short
yeah,
form makes sense.
the level to which the luminaries are being obscured, like
Right.
total being completely obscured to the annular being or partial or penumbral being less. So just like a varying degree of the amount of shadow that they're.
Right, right. And that's where we get sometimes a lunar eclipse could be like a blood moon where it looks like it's completely red from the shadow. And this one won't, unless you actually can see it. I guess it depends in the part of the world you're in, but this one will just kind of like fade out the moon a bit. It won't be as bright and as full as it would normally look.
Or maybe there'll be more of that upon its rising, that you'll be able to see more of does that happen sometimes, right? Where it's when it's rising, you can see more of that color or shadow from the eclipse.
Yeah,
As it gets
definitely.
into the sky, it's less. So, but the effects are still definitely felt. And as we were just discussing before we started today with each other, that we're in the eclipse season portal now. So we're already feeling these energies and will only continue to do so more and more, especially as we move from this full moon lunar eclipse to the solar eclipse in the beginning of October will be a more intense one. So
Definitely, yes.
so let's go ahead and we can pull up the chart. I'm going to share my screen with you guys so we can see the chart for this eclipse. Just excuse my background there. Okay, so here we go. So you can see that the sun is down here in the sign of Virgo at 25 degrees, in opposition to the moon, hence the full moon at 25 degrees of Pisces. So it's this, um, the placement of the moon in the lunar eclipse that denotes the sign and degree of the eclipse, 25 degrees Pisces. And
Right.
we can see that the moon is also smack dab in the middle of Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, which is fun. And making some very interesting aspects. We've had this there's this kite here between the Pisces little mini stellium to Uranus and Pluto connecting to the sun. There's also some T squares happening here. So you can see that the energy of this eclipse is definitely um, not simple, right?
Right.
A
It seems
little,
like a mixed bag
yeah.
because there's a difficult aspect, the T square, which are all the red lines. And then there's the kite, which is that it literally looks like a kite, that blue, all the blue lines, right? Which are usually easier energies to deal with.
Yes, but the kite is interesting because, and I'm always looking for more information on kites because my oldest daughter, has one in her chart.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the kite has this grand trine and then the sextile aspects on top of it, but it's the opposition that creates like the tension for the kite,
Yes.
and that working to balance that is then what can allow the kite to kind of fly, let's say,
Yes.
right?
Definitely that boomerang
That's a good word.
is what it's called, I believe. And it's because this is a full moon, it's the moon and the sun making that boomerang opposition aspect of like, how do we get our kite off the ground? Well, I guess we need to come to some sort of, it seems it's like a crossroads, right? We need to come to some sort of conclusion or compromise or something and able to get that kite off the ground for sure. And that compromise or difficult decision seems to be coming from Jupiter in Gemini at the apex of the T square, or the moon at the apex of the kite between Neptune and Saturn. So, there's a lot of different energies at play here, definitely.
And I think that that word crossroads that you used is just really poignant for
Mm-hmm.
this particular eclipse. Also, kind of leading us into this next season and time of year, right? Where we're at a crossroads um, at Samhain, at Halloween.
Yes.
And I see this kind of like almost like a threshold to that. Like, I don't know, something about this really resonates with that kind of underworld journey, that crossroads of like having to make a decision and choose a path and to choose the one that's more like to go deeper into the shadow.
Yeah, and that's another thing about eclipses, right? Because they're literally making a shadow. The luminaries are the lights, so the moon and the sun are not lighting up the way they normally would. So it does cast that shadow, as we see with like a total blood moon eclipse or whatever, right? Like it's eerie and it's like I don't see what I should be seeing right now. And I think that's why eclipses are so crazy and wild and like get that name, because we can't, normally the sun would give us some sort of like a spotlight or a direction to take, whereas right now not so much. It's obscured,
Yeah,
mysterious,
and
hidden,
that's
all that stuff.
also why historically eclipses were considered to be such a bad omen,
Mm-hmm.
because just imagine if you're basing your whole world around kind of like the cycles of the sun and the moon, and then all of a sudden that gets thrown into total darkness, like the intensity of
Yeah.
that. Now we have a little more understanding about why that happens and can predict when and all of that, but I just always think about like how
It
tricky that
just,
would be.
yeah, and it doesn't really make it that much easier. Like we could do all the research and all the time and all the world, and it's still the thing about the nodes of the moon are said to be fated points. So it's almost like fate drives this, and we don't really we feel like we get to make that decision at the crossroads, but it's kind of made for us
Yeah,
in some sense of the way.
I always describe eclipse energy a couple of ways. Like I say that the best way to work with eclipse energy is to let go or be dragged. It's
Yes.
going to take you in a direction, so you might as well allow it to. And to me, it seems very Wizard of Oz, where all of a sudden it's like your house gets picked up and spun around, and then you're put down somewhere completely different, and you come out and you're like not in Kansas anymore.
Yes. It's very true. And it's like, you just have to surrender to it. You can't force it. Otherwise, it just makes it so much more difficult. And life is so much more harder to deal with when you're trying to take over control and force things. Because really, we only have control over like what we're doing and our feelings towards whatever situations are showing up in life.
Yeah,
Um,
our
so yeah,
response.
sacrifice, surrender, all those kind of are keywords to this. Especially in the sign of Pisces, where it is a mutable water sign. It's very much about just like letting go and going with the flow of things. There's no boundaries, there's no borders, you just flow, right?
Well,
Um,
also, I was just thinking as you were saying that about, also in the sign of Pisces, I was thinking like, oh, also right in between Neptune and Saturn,
yeah, yeah,
Neptune is really the planet of sacrifice, right? Of some kind of self-sacrifice, sacrifice for, the collective, um, that lack of boundaries. And then Saturn is also, the Lord of karma. And
right.
right? So it kind of has, and all in the sign of Pisces, kind of really kind of more than doubles down on those themes.
Especially because they're both in retrograde, which would kind of indicate this is more, it's an inward or emotional realm sort of thing. It's not really happening outside of us right now. It's more like in certain situations, obviously, it depends on your own birth chart and how it's hitting your chart, and if it's hitting very personal planets or your own luminaries, like say it's your birthday or something like that's a really big pivotal transformation or life-changing thing that happens. But for most of us it's probably going to be like a unconscious or subconscious or like dream world sort of feeling, or imaginative or creative or something like that, right? Very Piscean.
Yeah, more like deep inner work, it feels like.
Yes. Um, and from like years on top of years, like as I was doing the research, it just seemed like a lot of these cycles are taking us back to like 12 years, 14 years, 15 years ago when Pluto first entered Capricorn. And now that Pluto's ending that time and Neptune's ending her time in Pisces, which has been a 14-year transit. Saturn's going to aid her in that as they leave Pisces together and move into the sign of Aries, where the North Node is. So the North Node's not in Pisces, it's in Aries still, and it's an out of sign eclipse. And it's almost like ushering in that new Aries energy. The energy we felt from the April eclipse, not quite beginning yet. We still have to make this ending here as Neptune and Saturn leave Pisces, and that won't happen until next year. And this is the first set of eclipses between that Virgo Pisces energy, which is like it's like the beginning of an end sort
Yeah,
of thing.
agreed. Because as all those, as Neptune and Saturn move into Aries, it really is kind of the beginning of a new era, and we've already started that with Pluto coming back into Capricorn. This final dip in is definitely kind of like wrapping up the loose ends, tying everything up from this, almost, what was it, 17-year cycle of Pluto moving through
Yeah,
it.
a lot of it seems to take us back to like 2008ish, around there.
Yes.
Um, And I don't know, it depends in your own life, obviously, but if you go back to 2008 and look at like what was beginning in that time in your life, it's probably a lot of this bringing up like the karmic completion of that cycle. And it seems like the apex of that kite, I call it a minor triangle. I don't know what you call it, but it's the two sextiles with the trine between them, with those three huge outer planets, right? That are like transpersonal planets, meaning they transcend like our consciousness, like it's beyond our reality. We don't have any control over what happens with those guys.
Yeah, it's bigger than the personal experience.
Yes, yes. This is like a whole thing. It's like beyond the collective, right? Something
Yeah.
like that.
So there's definitely, multiple, and this is one of the interesting things about astrology is when you're looking at any chart, be it a birth chart or an event chart like this, and you start to see kind of the same theme show up in multiple places, it takes on like a very strong, it's a big energy. And so we
Hmm.
see that here kind of again and again with this eclipse that there is this really big theme of wrapping things up, of things coming to an end. And really, I think the emotions that come with that, with this being in the sign of Pisces and with, the moon in general. Um, and I almost feel like this eclipse is going to be felt emotionally in such a way that we kind of can't rely on our logical thinking mind the same way that we normally would. If we look at the position of Mercury in this chart, like it's really not set up to function at its best. And even though it's in its home sign of Virgo, but I just keep feeling like we're going to need some other kind of coping tools to fall back on, right? Whether it's some kind
Yeah.
of like spiritual practice or creative outlet or like something outside of the box of how we normally process things and make sense of things. I don't think that this is going to make as much like logical sense, this energy.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially because Mercury's moving towards an opposition with Saturn,
Mhm.
and then they're creating their own T square between Jupiter, who Mercury is ruling right now, and Jupiter is actually the ruler of this eclipse, it being a Pisces eclipse traditionally.
Mhm.
Jupiter would rule Pisces. And Jupiter's not having the best time in Gemini. It's trying to, but it keeps running into these squares between Saturn and now the Sun. It's actually going to make a square with the Sun today, I believe. So it's, squares with Jupiter aren't horrible, but when Jupiter's in a sign that it doesn't love to be in, probably really messes, especially with Gemini stuff, messes with the mindset, right? When we're feeling the Pisces energy of this eclipse, where everything is very unclear, like somewhere in the in between,
That,
there's
yeah,
like this
beyond the
weird,
veil.
yeah, it's
The whole,
very nebulous,
yes.
and it can be like doomy in that sort of sense. It's like a foggy day. I always talk about Neptune like that. Foggy day,
Totally
can't
fog,
see where we're
mist.
going.
Yes.
Yeah, we have no logic to rely on because we literally can't see. So
Yeah.
we have to use our intuition and imagine the path and like just feel the path and hope. Use Jupiter to hope and have faith and believe in ourselves that that's the direction that we're supposed to go in.
Yeah, and I think when I think about squares to Jupiter, I obviously agree with you that they're not the worst because Jupiter is the great benefic. And so even in
Mm-hmm.
a square and a tense aspect, it tends to still, it's still Jupiter. But I always do think about it as kind of like an amplifier, like it either turns up the volume or makes things kind of like what's it like in Mario Brothers where you eat the mushroom and it's like bloop bloop, like you
Yeah, it's
right?
yeah, you're right, amplified for
Yeah, it
sure.
just like that to me is like Jupiter. So when it's with a challenging energy, like we don't see this in this chart, but when, Jupiter and Mars conjuncted,
Mhm.
in conjunct, where you say it, that's like it's kind of gasoline, right, on the fire of Mars. Like it does make things bigger. So amplifying this kind of confusion with Neptune and our ability to not see clearly with the sun in an eclipse just says to me to kind of prepare to not be able to kind of figure your stuff out the way that you normally would be able to, like to be more nebulous, to not really know what's going on for a
Mhm.
period of time, especially when we're talking about the faded energy of the nodes and being, the eclipses moving us kind of a course correction, right? Coming in and saying and steering us back on a more aligned
Right.
track, but one that maybe we weren't going down. And so how do we and this energy of the mutable signs, like how do
Yeah, the
we go
mutability is a
yeah,
big
so
player
how
in
do
this,
we
right?
go with the flow of all of that? Like, how do we practice? It's one thing to say, oh, just let go and go with the flow. But depending on the type of person you are, like, I can say that till the cows come home, and it's still not easy for me to do. I still have to
Oh,
have
yeah.
practices in place to get me through that. All right.
Mhm.
So I've been thinking about like how to redirect the energy in a different, more creative, flowy way. Like whether that's like getting back in touch with some kind of spiritual practice, going to yoga more, doing some breath work, doing some kind of free form journaling or art processing or something like that seems to be
That's very true, and I think that's where that grand Earth trine will really come into play because it does give us a better sense of grounding through the Earth signs to be able to find an outlet sort of from all this what could be seemingly chaotic
yeah.
energy, right?
Yes, but because of the planets involved, like Uranus and Taurus is very earthquake.
Yeah, yeah,
Shaking up.
that's
Like
true.
being a Capricorn rising, Capricorn moon, and having dealt with Pluto for so long, like it's deeply transformational, but that requires so much.
It does. It requires the upheaval from Uranus.
Yeah. So even though and it's like that grand trine of the earth where it's just this easy flow of changeability.
Yeah, it could go either way. It could be like too easy for destruction to
Yeah.
happen.
Not feeling super stable to me,
Right, right.
so
That's very true. Um, but we could use it also as an outlet just to
oh,
like
yes,
breathe and be grounded
totally.
and like release it into nature or something in some way,
I
right?
think that it's a good opportunity to find like a different outlet. Like I think it's a
Mhm. Mhm.
opportunity. There needs to be an outlet for it, but it's kind of almost like challenging us to get out of the box on what that is. And I think that ties in with the North Node and Aries and all of this like endings and ushering us into something new because it's kind of like what you've done in the past, like you're not going to be able to just sit down and figure this one out. You're going to have
Mhm.
to like work through it in some more unique and out of the box way that takes you into a different realm of yourself almost.
Very true. And I think maybe it does have something that has to do with something that happened 15 years ago. Like maybe there was a practice that you used to do and it's time to get back to that, like some sort of creative outlet that because of all of that crazy Pluto in Capricorn energy, it went to the wayside and it got forgotten about because we got distracted by all the other things in life, like it just seems like something from the past is coming back to be revealed almost so that we can take that for what it is and understand it in this new energy and then like go about whatever it is we need to do with that. Either we could completely bring a completion to it or we start a new avenue based on like more intuitive, creative, imaginative stuff like that, right?
Yeah, or like we're working with it in a different way because we've transformed since.
Yes,
And so
because
now,
we've evolved so much in
yes.
that last 15-year cycle, and that's what Pluto does. It brings some sort of, it seems like a very destructive force, but it's so that we can be stronger and rise above it, and now we're better off for it. So whatever happened in your life, well, Pluto moved through Capricorn is probably a pretty good indication of what we need to release or just surrender to.
Oh, yeah. My cap rising is like, oh yeah, you mean like a complete transformation of self.
Yeah, a lot of Cap risings. I don't know if you feel that. Like you probably don't even recognize your old self
Oh yeah,
anymore.
totally different, totally burned down. And that's so interesting that we're kind of just like segueing into that because that's, true for if you're Capricorn rising. But in general, like there's also this inconjunct happening here with Venus and
Mm,
the moon, which is, really about how we feel about our own self-worth and self-approval. And so I see that there's some kind of opportunity here to kind of work through some of our stuff
yeah,
around
because there's a hidden, some sort of latent talent there that again, maybe we forgot about over time and it's time to get back to it or something. But that's also going to be a really big, um, so this eclipse at peaks, it starts to pick up around now, yesterday-ish. It builds for the week on Tuesday at peaks. And then it kind of gives us a little bit of like aftermath time. And then the next eclipse starts picking up. And that next eclipse is going to be a lot about that Venetian stuff in our lives, like our values and all that sort of relational stuff
yeah.
and creative stuff, because it is in Libra and it's the last eclipse in Libra and it's a South Node eclipse. So still more endings on the way. It's like this is like the beginning of a
Yeah.
release cycle, and then the next one's like, okay, I know what I need to release. And then all the Pisces eclipses are lunar eclipses, so we won't see a solar eclipse between the Pisces Virgo axis until there's a Virgo eclipse or a solar Virgo eclipse, right? So it's like endings on top of endings on top of endings until Neptune and Saturn move into Aries.
Yeah, it's like a long goodbye, right? This is not
Yes.
like a easily wrapped up, but it is an energy of beginning that transition. And I think that, Venus being placed as it is in this chart with the inconjunct to the moon and the square to Pluto, and then the trine to Jupiter just really
Mm,
does set us up for um, an opportunity to do that work,
yeah,
especially
that's a great point because that trine between Venus and Jupiter will happen, I believe, on Sunday.
it does.
So it's a really nice energy before the chaos of the eclipse takes over. So
Yes.
we get this beautiful opportunity, even though Jupiter's in detriment, it's still doing Jupiter things. So these are both benefic planets. They're both very beneficial. They're very both are very helpful, like they work for our benefits. So we need to take advantage of that and like listen or use that energy to its fullest before, so yeah, that opportunity, it's going to be great. And it might really feel good over the weekend and then it kind of dips down again.
I just wonder if it's like inviting us. to just explore those kind of relationship themes and how we show up in that and like our own power. Like we've been separately talking about this ongoing energy of Mars and Venus and the malefics and the benefics and this
Hmm.
I know a lot of people who are going through things when it comes to gender roles and roles within relationship and what does it mean to be masculine and what does it mean to be feminine and how we embody both and playing with those um you know gender conformity and non-conformity and all of these kind of like bigger themes that also tie into like self-worth and our own personal power. And so I wonder here if there's some kind of, then with the inconjunct to the moon and how we feel our inner emotional world, like an opportunity to get back to like reclaiming our power, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And that also sort of fits with when Venus makes that square to Pluto, because it's like, it's now or never, almost sort of energy. Take your power back, because
Yeah.
that's what Pluto is. It's our personal power. And it seems like Venus has been going through this her own cycle of like deciding whether or not she wants to give put other people before her, or if she's now more or less like, I come first and I need to kind of release the fact that I might think that's selfish to put myself and my values and my sense of worth before other people's stuff, because a lot of it is like the give and take of that Libra energy. It's supposed to be 50-50, but that almost never happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
echoed also with the nodes in Aries and Libra, right?
mhm.
And that axis of self and other and relationship. And I think that in conjunct to the moon is also there's an energy of, trying to balance those things, the self and the relationship, but also inviting us into not caring so much about what other people think. And maybe there's some Neptunian themes there of martyrdom, right? And like
Exactly.
Saturn comes in to clean that up and put in stronger boundaries. We've all been working with that since Saturn went into Pisces. But
Yeah, and that's sort of like that placing other people on a pedestal or making some version of them up in your head that just isn't the reality of who that person actually is. And it kind of like when that stuff comes to light, it's like, wow, I've been choosing toxic relationships over myself for way too long. And it's, it's like it's time. That's another thing about it's like closure.
yeah, or it's like this dynamic has to end. Like this
Hmm.
type of dynamic that we've been participating in, either knowingly or unknowingly, willingly or unwillingly, like this kind of just seems to be coming to a head. Like, not that the relationship necessarily has to end in every situation, but that the dynamic needs
Yes.
to
Yeah.
trans.
And it's definitely something there with Neptune and Saturn about reality versus imagination, and what is real and what isn't real, and why have we been like making it up in our mind like it's some sort of fairy tale or something, when there's no prince in shining armor coming on his white horse to save us. Like, we can't look for other people to save us anymore, is sort of
Yeah.
another dynamic of that. It's
Like
time to kind of like step up and be like, oh, okay,
take
this
our
is
take
my
our power
reality.
back.
Yeah. Yeah, again, taking your power back for sure.
Yeah, and almost like remembering, and you think to what you were saying about all of these other themes of 15 years ago, or all these, parts of ourselves that maybe we lost along the way. It's like reclaiming that or coming back home to that in a new way? Like, how can we come back to those parts of ourselves that we gave away or lost or for whatever reason, have forgotten? How can we come back to that, but as this new transformed, empowered version of ourselves, not going back to who we were, but bringing that old version and integrating it into, who we are now, especially after going through Pluto and Capricorn, wherever that has been in your chart.
Yeah, so true. Very relational. And that it really talks to that if you want to bring in the Saros series of what that Libra eclipse is going to be, it does talk about separation and loss and being parted and bringing something to a completion. Even though we feel sad about it, and we're kind of like that Pisces energy of empathy, like I still care. I still really like want this relationship to work or whatever it is. I can't put my reaching hand out anymore if you're not going to give back to me. And there is some sort of, it is a grand completion is what it feels like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, something there with reciprocation, right? And what we're putting our energy into.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And then also the emotions that, like you said, go along with that of like almost like a bittersweetness.
Yes, yeah, that exactly. It's like Neptune knows better. Pisces knows better. These are very wise. It's the last sign of the zodiac. It's ruled by Jupiter. Like they have innate understanding and knowledge, but they go out of their way to do it anyways because it's just the empathy and the fact that I have compassion and and that's it is a very nice attribute to have, but it's also like Saturn comes in. It's like you need boundaries and you need to be responsible about your empathy. You can't just openly give it away because it hurts you. It ends up being like hurtful for you, unfortunately, in most cases,
And
right?
we've been working with that energy of Saturn and Neptune and Pisces for
Mm-hmm.
some time now, like well over a year, right? And it's interesting that now all of a sudden having Mars just having gone into Cancer seems like a real catalyst, especially with the upcoming Mars retrograde that's going to happen from Leo back into Cancer. So we're dealing with this Mars and Cancer energy all the way through the end of April. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that making this this trine to Saturn, and it's technically, I don't even, I would say it's more of a trine energy there of
Yeah, I think what happens is because for the second eclipse, Venus will be in Scorpio and it squares Mars. So I think it will make a grand water trine with Saturn at some point.
yeah,
Mars,
all
Venus, and
trine.
Saturn.
So that's interesting to me. I wonder if Mars is going to be some kind of catalyst, especially moving through Cancer, which is like, things aren't going to be things are going to be emotional, they're not going to be direct, there's going to be that kind of side to side energy.
Hmm.
And
Like I want to avoid it, but I know I need to deal with it, sort of thing. But I'm still trying to sort through my emotions on it.
yes, yeah,
Because emotions are what's seems to be getting in the way here with Mars and Cancer.
yeah, so not necessarily like the time to act on any of this, like there's going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of ties back into finding a way to get through this energy, because it's going to be like, what's the right word, like things aren't going to be clear for some time, I think. I think we're going to feel a lot of emotions and not really know what to do with them, where to put them, how to act on them, what to think about them. I think it's
Right. And it's
tough.
probably going to be frustrating with Mars and Cancer.
Yes, for
And
sure.
that can cause its own stuff, especially because the moon in Pisces rules Cancer. So it's the dispositor of Mars, right? It's
Yes.
trying to control Mars, but Mars on his own is just, and he
Ours
rules the
is
North
not like that.
Node.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, so he has a big play in this too. And that again, the second part of the theme of this eclipse is that, like, if we are taking physical action, what does the book say? Physical injury is also possible through overstimulating one's strength. This is not the time to undertake strenuous physical activities. So it's almost like take a break.
Yeah,
Like,
because even if it's out of sign, Mars is squaring Neptune. It's like a wide square, degree-based square, but that's not a great energy for immunity or physical vitality. And
right.
so definitely a time to be more cautious with
Yeah. And not
physical health.
forceful. Like, we can't,
Don't
like I
push
said
it.
earlier, we can't force this to happen. We can't make it happen.
Yeah, don't push it.
It's gonna have to play out over time. And again, that's what eclipses do. Like, we don't see it. It's overshadowed in some way. And it takes a lot of time for it to actually like come to light. Even it can be like weeks, months, and even years after the actual eclipse, as other planets start waking up those degrees, that we only see it, like we only see it then. um so yeah, eclipses take a long time, and there's still eclipses playing out from years before this eclipse. So
And that's interesting that you said that because at least when it comes to the Sorrow series for the next eclipse in Libra, um, that has continuously been and will be this upcoming eclipse be activated by Venus as the first planet that hits the degree point. So definitely ties back in with those Venus themes of relationship and um, how we're working with others in harmony and kind of, wanting that energy in our lives. How that's
yeah. And Mars is in a feminine water sign. Like, he doesn't get to use his masculine forceful energy right now at all. So those people who are trying to, initiate and push and give,
dominate.
yeah, that exactly, that's a great word for it. He has to feel more respectful and just allow and accept right now. And so the people who are still trying to push and dominate and make things happen are gonna get burnt out. And
Yeah,
it's gonna be it again. We're in a foggy day. We can't just like run straight ahead into the fog and hope for the best. We have to sort of like feel through it and use our senses, and
not
you
run into
know
something,
yeah.
not hit a wall. Well, it's funny what you were just saying about Mars. I wonder if this is some kind of like wrapping up of toxic masculinity or redefining of masculinity or some kind of,
Yeah,
like
and
strength and
that's
dark
definitely a
feminine
theme.
power.
I think that's definitely a theme where the feminine energy is starting to take over, right? It's not so much all about the masculine anymore. It's about being more receptive and open to the energy. And this eclipse is going to kind of, again, it's like it's a catalyst, but it's also a completion cycle because it's a lunar eclipse. So it's interesting. It is a mixed bag of energy for sure. We're probably all going to be feeling very like, I really need to do something, but I just can't, sort of thing. That feeling, right?
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how this unfolds, and then we'll have to come back and talk about the October 2nd eclipse because that one's gonna pack a bigger punch.
Yeah, that one is very close. So this one's an out of sign eclipse, so that energy might not be as strong unless it's hitting very sensitive points in your own chart. But the next one is very close to the south node. So it's a stronger eclipse for sure. And it's a solar eclipse. So
Yeah, and we've
um
already been in that particular eclipse cycle. So,
exactly, yes. It's actually bringing that one to a close too. But we won't see the Aries eclipse until next spring, I believe.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so is there anything else do you wanna wrap up on this one here? Is there anything else you think that we missed that we should be touching on?
Oh, I think we did a pretty good job. I don't know. Do you see anything else? Like we talked about Jupiter, we talked about Mars, that T square, the kite and the trine, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess just
Oh,
to like
I guess
talk about.
the only other thing that I think that we didn't talk about that could be pertinent to the themes that we already discussed, is Chiron's role because it is an opposition to Venus,
Mm,
just to
that
do
is true.
off, and in square to Pluto. So if we consider Chiron, that's like another T square there with Pluto, Chiron, and Venus, which brings in the themes of Chiron around the wounded healer, right? So that
Yes.
just kind of further, that's one of those additional layers that just adds on to those themes of like going down into the shadows of ourselves, into like really kind of our own journey as Persephone, right? To go down into the underworld and like one final time to kind of come out as a transformed, more empowered, badass warrior or something.
Yeah,
There, that version of Venus, right?
that's very true. And because of that total solar eclipse that we had during a Chiron Kazemi, which was the sun and the moon conjunct Chiron,
That's right.
it overshadows everything when it has to do with these eclipses. I think it's almost like it's time to heal,
Yeah.
and a lot of people aren't seeing that for what it truly is, but a lot of people are seeing it and they're like, I need to work on healing myself so that I can be my best me and that I'm not making up things that are like half truths or like Venus themes of getting jealous or envious over other people's lives when those people's lives aren't actually, that's just an Instagram story or something like that, you know?
Yeah, not even
Um, and it's like, because Chiron in Aries in itself is like a wound to self awareness and being more, just overall self, because that's what Aries is. It's very much about the self. So that really helps in relation to Venus while she's in Libra, which is about the self versus other people. And how can I heal myself so I can be the best um, in a relationship with another
yeah.
person?
Yeah, the work that we do on ourselves
Mm-hmm.
immediately, benefits and impacts how we show up in our relationships.
Yeah. So that opposition there between Venus and Chiron during this eclipse, it's actually really important, probably. So I'm glad you brought that up because Chiron is retrograde now. So again, another energy of internalizing it and getting down into the root of like the subconscious or psychological blockages that we might have around our core wound or what that means to us, sort of thing, what healing really means.
Yeah, and like using it as a key, Chiron is the key, right? To
Mm-hmm.
unlock
Mm-hmm.
that deeper part of ourselves and open it up. So yeah, it should be interesting. I'm interested. I'm looking forward to this one. Not so much the next one, but this one.
Yeah, this one seems like a journey through time. It's like
Yeah, I'm down with
I've
that.
gone through all of this stuff. Who am I now? Because I went through all of it, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I love that Pisces energy. It can be like time shifts, or it can bring in like very synchronistic like signs and like dreams. There's probably going to be a lot of dreams. Have you had dreams yet?
No, but that's a good point, and something that I think would be an interesting way to kind of process this eclipse season would be maybe to dream journal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good outlet. Um,
Yeah, if you guys have crazy dreams, like write that
Write them
down
down.
because it's
Yeah, pay
probably
attention.
some Claire something about something.
Oh, you know what else too has been coming up for me is like symbolism, paying attention to signs out in
Yes.
like I've seen a lot of like spirit animal stuff personally.
Yeah, that's what I mean by like
Yeah.
synchronicities. And
Yeah,
it's like, whoa, I just watched that because I had something, I was watching a show and then we turned it off. And then the same names and stuff in that show were on the new show. And I was like, what?
yeah, some
Like,
weird
why is this happening? It's weird. And that's what Pisces and Neptune and all that. It's just very weird, very strange, right?
but also very like there's such a deep energy of mysticism. And so really remembering our magic, like
Yes.
who we truly are. Like, yes, we are these identities in this body, and we go about our day doing our jobs and being parents or siblings or friends or coworkers or children, whatever it is. We have so many identities and roles, but at the end of the day, like, who are we on this deeper level, and are we like stardust, and isn't this like the magic
Yes.
of life that we're
The
handling?
interconnectedness.
Yeah, and
That's a good word for Pisces and Neptune.
spiritual nature of it all, I
Hmm.
think is, really strong now, and remembering that or coming home to that part of ourselves is, we're ready for it.
Yes. Um, and yeah, it's cool to see when weird things happen and just have that,
Yeah,
oh, that intuitive hit or whatever, right? It's
yeah,
like
and to not
unlocking something. And it is, there are probably gifts waking up. It is very psychic, right? It is very sensitive and all that kind of, like you said, mystical and interconnectedness. And we're all intertwined in some way. And it's just all bigger than what our conscious can take. It's like, it's, yeah, it's mind boggling when you get into all of it. But I'm sure we'll all have like some sort of crazy dreams or
yeah.
intuitive hits or those synchronicities popping up.
And the work is just to pay attention, to notice,
Hmm.
right?
Exactly. Don't ignore it. Don't second guess it.
Exactly.
You
Trust it.
know, there's, like you said, we can't be using logic. It's a very intuitive, instinctual force.
Yeah, I love that. Great summarization. All right. Well, we
Awesome.
hopefully this was helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
And let us know. Also, we're both professional astrologers and available for readings. So, Maggie, where can people find you to book with you?
Well, if you're in the group, you can just find me there, message me, or my website is madebymagsastro.com, or Made by Mags Astro on Facebook is probably the best ways to reach me. What about you, Erin?
So the best way to reach me is just through my website, which is erinlento.com, and you can schedule with me right there, or like same, just connect with me on Facebook or whatever works. And then we will be back before the next eclipse to kind of go over that one in the same way. But we'd love your feedback and let us know if this was helpful. And thanks so much, everyone, for listening. All right. Bye.
Yay, bye.